Today we're interviewing Mr. Frank Vitale, the founder and director of Vitale Productions. It's a pleasure to be interviewing you today. Before the interview, we just wanted to thank you for taking your time. I'm sorry my partner, Sorge, actually can't take part in this interview today. He injured his foot. But the first question that we always ask is, what were your company roots and how did they help you get into Vitale Productions?
Okay, so this is a sole proprietorship. It's Vitale Productions is me, and I'm a filmmaker. I actually have a degree in physics, but I wasn't that interested in it. And I came to New York and I worked for fashion photographers. And then I worked for filmmakers. And then I started making my own films. And that's what I've been doing for decades.
Okay, so you have lived through a huge evolution in film. So how has the industry changed since you were a child to now, and was it for the better?
Yeah, it's for the better. I'm a little nostalgic about film, that kind of stuff you can hold in your hands and smells funny. Um, so yeah, I was making films with pellicule with the uh, I guess it's film like Thomas Edison made it. Wasn't much different. So it's developed in a lab and huge equipment to make this. I saw over about a 10-year period the move to computers. You know, we were editing on tape, and then computers were controlling the tape machines. And then we would do music, and suddenly people are starting not to use CDs, but they're starting to use computers to make music and to edit it in the film. And over a period, everything went to computers. It's a lot better now. But a lot of people are still nostalgic for film. It does look different. So people who are into art and not into practical entertainment, move back to that a bit, although it's expensive and it's cumbersome.
Yes. You currently teach at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. So what activities are involved in a day-to-day basis of being a film and animation teacher?
Okay, well, I don't think you had that quite right. I teach one course. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's called Introduction to Film, and it's a continuing ed, and there's no day-to-day activities. I do it once a week and maybe once or twice a year. But what I do is I help people realize their dream of making a film. So I have to teach them how to use the camera and use the sound and the lighting, but I consider that a bit of a necessary evil. It's really about creativity and about someone coming up with a concept, maybe much like you guys coming up with a concept of doing this. In fact, I'm going to interview you a little bit. I'm wondering, what I was going to say is that people struggle. They have to face their own insecurities, and they when they're making their films, they hit obstacles, and you get nervous. You know, you're going to put yourself up on the screen for everybody to see. Are you going to look like a jerk? That's just natural. Did you guys have any struggles when you evolved this thing that you're doing?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we had to email a bunch of companies, and since we were growing and starting up, a bunch of companies, when we emailed them, didn't respond to accept an interview. So we had to keep emailing companies, and that was the hardest part, growing and starting up. So luckily, one company helped us accept it, and then from there, he gave us referrals. So then that built up the whole network. So then we got more and more interviews.
Well,
Successful.
listen, I'm just an individual filmmaker, but Joachim Frank is a Nobel laureate, and I think you had other Nobel laureates. That's a big deal.
Yeah, thank you. So you said that cities are living and breathing organisms. So how did you acquire that perspective?
Okay, I want to talk about that, and then I want to ask you what you think of that, because I think that a lot of people think it's a crazy idea, but it's not. When I was your age, I studied physics in high school, and I studied Newtonian mechanics, and I loved it. But I was a Catholic, and I saw something that bothered me about that. Um, and that area of physics. In fact, I think in all science, um, uh, biology and the physical world are determined by natural laws. And the resulting philosophical dilemma is that human behavior is determined because humans are physical. And that bothered me a lot. It bothered me for about 10 years. But the vision that came from that was that a city is an organism, that we are both human and a thing. And when you look at us from a scientific perspective and you try to not be subjective and remove yourself from being human, but looking at it like a science mind, it's an organism. There's no question about it. And some of the things, for one thing, is that very early on, probably 20 years ago, my dilemma was, well, how can we be part of an organism if we drive the cars? You know, if we determine the car's behavior. But, and I'm not explaining this totally accurately, but I realized that the cars drive us. This was like 20 or 30 years ago, long before self-driving cars. And now that kind of, it wasn't a prophecy, but that's one element that kind of, I think, helps prove, or at least helps us be able to see that cities are organisms and that we are, it's not, you know, we think of a city as something that's a human design, human based, human invention, but it's biological. It's not something that we control with our frontal lobe. It's something that we're part of. So how did I come to you? I don't remember what your question was.
How did you acquire that perspective?
I think I acquired it because I became so possessed by physics and by science that I thought in those terms. And I saw things that other people don't see. None of my classmates knew what the hell I was talking about. But determinism was a dilemma after Newtonian mechanics, and it still is. Nobody's really solved it. Do you know what determinism is?
Oh, what was the question again? Sorry.
Do you know what determinism is?
No.
Well, you probably study science, right?
Yeah. Like I'm going to high school, so I don't study in depth officially.
You're not in high school yet either?
No, I'm going to ninth grade this year.
Okay. Well, someday you'll learn what determinism is and you'll get back in touch with me. But do you find the idea of a city being an organism out there? Like, does it seem like a crazy idea?
No, I actually agree with it since we create cities, since we make cities make up of humans. So by that standard, cities are technically organisms since we make up them. Like,
since we are an organism.
yeah.
Well, let me ask you something else. Do you see a hard difference between a human and a thing? A human being you and I, and a thing being that chair you're sitting in. Do you think there's some fundamental difference between them?
I would say, like, kind of, since chairs are not technically living, but they do, like, they have like a function, they have a task like us. They require people to sit on them. So they technically go by the same standards we do. They have like a job. I don't know how you would say that, but like they have like the same standards we do, since they basically perform the same function. Like every day they have like a task to do at hand and they complete it basically.
I like that. I haven't thought of that before. I like that. But let me ask you, now I'm going to phrase the question differently. How about between a human and an amoeba? Fundamental difference, or are we just, is there a fundamental difference?
I actually don't know about that one. What do you think about that one?
From a science perspective, there's no difference. But from a human perspective, humans have free will and determine what we do. An amoeba is a biological entity, and the chemicals in its body behave in a deterministic way. In other words, there's a concept called teleology. It means with an end in sight. We think that we do things with an end in sight. Uh, we hammer a nail to build a building, let's say. But, but science is not teleological. In other words, sodium and chloride don't sit around and say, hey, let's form salt. It's in their nature when they're near each other to combine and form salt. It's not a will choice. It's what happens due to their nature. Okay? So that's a fundamental difference between how we view humans and how we view things. But the trouble is that we are a thing. You know, our hands are things. Our blood is a thing. So that's what the philosophical. So you know, we were talking about cities and organisms, and people. That's what you or other people would gravitate to, in the sense that, well, it's an interesting concept. Let's talk about it. But there's a philosophical basis, and I have gone there. Maybe I shouldn't have, because maybe it's not something that your listeners would be interested in.
So the next question was, how did you create the Metropolis organism? Was it with drones, Google Maps, or like a plane?
You're absolutely right. It was, I did shoot some stuff from airplanes, but Google Maps and Google Earth and Google Earth Pro were my constant companions. And also I used After Effects, which is an Adobe program, to create very basic, simple animation. But it's fun being in Google Earth and just looking all over the earth. I saw a TED Talk, someone sent it to me recently because it looked like my stuff, where a guy puts something up every day. And again, he's seeing it from a human perspective. He's seeing how the earth is changing and how it affects humans. And I look at it from a science perspective, just what is.
So in the Metropolis organisms, what exactly did you focus on when creating the short films and videos?
Well, first off, thank you for noticing it. Did you happen to look at any of them, or?
No, we were planning on actually buying it later on iTunes.
Oh, well, that's nice to buy it. But, oh yeah, there is a book, but you got to read it. But, you know, on YouTube, there's a series of like 50 videos. And it basically goes through it, and it deals with the philosophical aspect as well as the vision aspect. So I am disappointed in you. You're an interviewer. You should have, that's why I wanted to be able to talk to you, because I feel like that maybe it's an idea that a younger person would be open to. It's certainly not, I mean, even Joachim thinks that it's probably a tautology, meaning that it's circular reasoning. But I'm looking for people that can understand what I'm saying, and I can't find anybody.
So I found that within Vitale Productions, you worked with your family members, Tom and Katie. So what roles do they play during the productions?
Well, I have them on my website. I don't necessarily mean I work with them. My daughter is an architect, and she designs interior spaces. And my son's a producer. He's actually the main producer for Anthony Bourdain. You ever heard of Anthony Bourdain?
No.
Well, he just committed suicide, and it was a huge tragedy to my son and the company that he works for. So, but he's won 4 Emmys. He's a very successful producer on that show.
Are you currently working on any films right now? And what are your plans for the future? And how are you looking to expand?
I do feature films as well. The Metropolis organism is the science part of my brain. The other part of my brain is about the human heart. And I'm doing a docufiction feature with a woman who's written a bunch of novels, and she plays the lead role.
Yeah.
And I'm also doing a documentary feature with a Hasidic woman who makes films for the Hasidic community. A really fantastic personality who's very brash and outspoken, but is very sensitive and caring. And I really like her. And so I'm following her around and shooting her, making her movies.
So for Metropolis organisms, are there any plans to release it for other platforms like Android?
No, it would be a lot of work, and not a lot of people see it. It's very important to me, but I
Mhm.
have no idea how to get public, and I'm not sure that I mean, I honestly have shown this a lot, as much as I can, and nobody understands it. Maybe a couple of people understand it. I don't think you do either, if I could, but you haven't seen it. But nobody understands what I'm saying.
I will, like, we will, Soresh and I will see it, and then we'll email you about it.
Okay, I'd like that because
Okay.
I just feel you might be open to it. Maybe you won't be. I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I feel I'm bifurcated, that I have, and I guess we all do, have a science brain and a human brain. And,
Mhm.
um, so I look at the world with both those brains, and they're contradictory. They really can't exist together, but they do.
So we always end the interview off on the same question. So what specific strategies would you give to the next generation of entrepreneurs and leaders to succeed in high school and beyond?
Well, I help my students by encouraging them, and I think what people, at least what I did, and probably a lot of people, they um, uh, confront the world with what the shoulds. Maybe they've been told all their life by their parents, you should do this, or by their teachers, you should do that. And uh, that is probably a good thing. It civilizes us, but it's a bad thing in that we don't really realize that we all bring a unique perspective, a unique
Mhm.
talent. And when you see yourself as going down that road, as exploring those talents, those maybe creative talents, which are even more vulnerable, it's scary. And you think you're the only one, and you think people are going to think you're an idiot, and they usually do think you're an idiot, or they call you an idiot because most of the time it's because they're jealous. Um, but that's what you have, and
Yeah.
if you don't, if that's not what drives you, if that's not what you nourish, you go nowhere. And not if you do nourish your individuality, and there's no guarantee of any kind of success, but you'll be a lot happier. And if you are going to be successful, that's the only way to do it.
Mhm. Thank you.